Okay, welcome to our next unit in our course, Developing Web Applications or Understanding Web Applications using the Go programming language. So in the last lesson, we looked at routing using a third-party router and the idea of a RESTful routing. Okay, so we want to switch gears. Sorry. We want to switch gears and we want to look at the idea of a session and the idea of a session manager. So if you think about it, HTTP is a stateless protocol. What do I mean by that? Well, each request that is sent is independent of every other request. So this statelessness simply means that there's no way for the web server to know that two requests are coming from the same location, or if meaning the same person. Okay, so if HTTP is stateless, then there is no way for us to naturally store or persist data, right? Because the requests are independent. So one request does not depend on another request. Okay, so when we talk about sessions and session managers, we want to be able to create state. We want to be able to persist some data about the client in between requests. Naturally, HTTP does not allow us to do that because it's stateless, right? Okay, so let's talk about how we can persist data. And to do that, we're going to talk about, or we're going to install a session manager, which will allow us to remember some state about our web application. Okay, so there are many session managers, but the one that we will be using is the one from Golang College, which is just sessions. And so to install that, I will simply say go get github.com/Golang college/sessions and version 1. Okay. Okay, so this sessions package will also install two other dependencies, two other packages that it depends on. Okay, great. So that is the first step, of course, to install the package that we need. Again, there are many. Now, what we need to do next is to set up our application. And the session manager, the instance of the session manager should be accessible to our handlers. So right away we know that we need to put it in the application struct. Okay, so what I'm going to do, okay, in the application struct, I'm going to create a variable named session, and it's going to be of type sessions dot session. Okay, and so when I save this, you'll notice that VS Code, Visual Studio Code, installs the library for me automatically in the imports. Okay, so the handlers need access to this session object. Okay, so there's one thing we want to do. We want to create another flag because this session, the way it works, it needs sort of a key, okay, a 32-bit 32-byte key. Okay, and we use that to actually sort of create a secure session key. Okay, so let me create a new flag, and this will allow the user to be able to put in, the key that is needed. Okay, so we're going to call this secret. Okay, so keep in mind all we're doing is setting up. Okay, so our flag is secret, and it's gonna be called using secret, and what we need to provide it is a key. Okay, of course this is the help message, which we will say is just secret key. Okay, and then I will just paste my key. Control Z. Paste my key that I have previously created. Of course, these are 32 values. Okay, and you can go ahead and make up your own. Okay, doesn't matter as long as it's not simple to guess. Okay, keep in mind this is your secret key, so you want the person to put it as a command line option, right? So that their key can be kept private. Right? Of course, my key is visible, but this is just to practice to show you. You could have easily made it into an environment variable. Okay, so we have our flag, and so the next thing we need to do now is to actually configure our session. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I am going to actually specify that I want to actually create a session, okay, an instance of session. So I'm going to say session, okay, and I will simply say sessions dot new, okay, and it requires a byte string, of course, which is the key. All right, and to do that, I'm just simply going to say byte, and I'm going to pass in our secret flag. Okay, okay, and so it will create a new session key for me. Right, so if you notice, it says a new session object to hold the configuration settings for your sessions. Okay, and it's an encrypted session, no? To encrypt session cookies, and it should be exactly 32 bytes long. Okay, okay, so we have our key, okay, and we will now have to specify, right? So if I say a session dot, okay, there's lots of things I can do with this session, and one of them is to actually set how long this session will last. Okay, and so that's what I mean by the lifetime. So I'm sure you've had the instance where you've logged in to some site and you stay logged in, but after a while, maybe a week or something, 7 days, it tells you you have to sign back in. Okay, and that's probably because the session that they set has expired. Okay, and so the session allows the server to know who you are. Okay, so let's say we want to set that this user session will expire after 12 hours. Okay, and so that's what we do here. Okay, oops, equal. Okay, so session is our object that we can now use, and so we will simply place that in here. Okay, and so session will be initialized with the session that we just created. Okay, good. So this session variable, this session field will be initialized with this session object. Okay, so now our session will be available to our handlers. Okay, moving on. There's one thing now we must do, and we finish with main. Okay, that's easy. We need to go back to routes, and what we will be doing is using the session manager's middleware to specify that some of our routes will be able to use or will be able to deal with session data. Okay, and so to do that, we're going to create a dynamic middleware. So let me cut this, put this up here. Okay, let's create the dynamic middleware. Okay, we're going to use Justina, so Alice, that new, and this middleware is actually going to be app that session that enable. Okay, so this is the middleware, and this middleware it loads and saves session data to and from the session cookie. Okay, so it says you should use this middleware to wrap all handlers which needs access to the session data. So again, we want to be able to keep some memory for the user in between the requests, right? So because normally nothing is remembered from one request to the next, but when you log into a system, provide a username and password, you want that to persist. All right, you want that to persist, and so we have to now use a session cookie, right? And so we need a session manager. Okay, so this is our middleware, and so we must wrap this. We must use this to wrap any of our handlers that needs access to that session data. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So, well, static won't need it, right? Because nothing changes, right? Create, we let create have it. Okay, so to do this, we will simply say dynamic middleware. Okay, so dynamic middleware, and then of course we will say then func, and then we don't need this anymore. Okay, we don't need the handler func anymore because the then func actually converts it for us. All right, normally we would use then, but Alice also provides us with the then func, which actually creates a handler func. And so we are using handler func to make our functions become a handler, but we don't need to do that anymore because it's automatically done for us. Oops. It's automatically done for us by Alice. Okay. Again, when you use middleware, when you use third-party packages, there's always a trade-off, and so reading the documentation is very important. Okay, so these handlers, we wrap them, and so we are telling Go that these three, oops, let's add this one too. Okay. Okay, we're telling Go that these handlers, okay, will have access to some data stored in some session cookie, in some cookie. Okay, so with that out of the way, we can actually move on to using the session cookie. Okay, and so let's do something simple just to show you what we mean. Let's go back to the handler. Okay, this is where everything is going to happen. And what we want to do is when you hit submit to store a quote, in addition to seeing the quote returned, we want to see a message at the top of the quote page that says the quote has been successfully added. Okay, in other in things like Node.js and so on, you call this a flash message. Okay, it shows up once and only once. So we want to do that to demonstrate to you how the session sessions manager work. Okay, so if we go to the create quote handler, where we create quotes, should be this one. Okay, nope, not this one. Yeah, create quote. So if you recall, after we write a quote to the database, insert a quote to the database, we redirect. Okay, so before we redirect, since that's the last thing that will be done, let's set a session data. Okay, set some session data. Okay, so what I want to do is to actually create a variable. Let's call it flash. And this variable will be a new, actually, let me not do that here. I'll do that anyway. I'm going to put a message. Okay, so session dot put. Okay. Now, what does the put function do? It puts a key and a corresponding value. Okay, so when you're talking about the session data, it's stored in a map. Key, value. So I want to put some data into my sessions map. Okay, and so this put requires the request, the key, and the type of the key. Okay, so we know it's R, and the key is just maybe a name, so let's call it flash. Right? And then the value of this is simply the message we want shown. So quote successfully added. Okay, all right. So on line 107, we want to put an entry into our sessions manager, into our cookie, into some storage that keeps track of the users of this current user. Now, after we have stored flash with quote successfully added, so when we refer to flash, we will know it means quote successfully added. Now, once I have put my entry into the session manager, or into the session storage, I will then redirect, all right, which means that it will take me to the show quote page. Okay, so it's my show quote page, right? That's where we get redirected to. And so remember, this page will basically show us the quote, right? Will show us the quote. So what we need to do is to actually get the flash message from the session data, from the session store. Okay, so what we're going to do, all right, let's come down here. Okay, we will get our check for the flash message. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to simply create a variable named flash, which will contain the string that was stored. So we're going to simply say app dot session dot pop. Okay, so we don't want to pop a bool, we don't want to pop a byte, we don't want to pop a float, we want to pop a string because we know it's a string. Okay, and the pop string simply means you're going to look for the entry, and once you get it, it means it's now deleted, right? If you remember from your data structures course, when you pop something, you get it back, and it's no longer in wherever it came from. Okay, so it's like getting it and deleting. Okay, right? So returns the value and then deletes it from the session data. Now, if it's missing, then it's just empty string, which is good for us, right? Empty string, either it's there or an empty string is returned. Good. So flash will either contain an empty string or it will contain the message quote successfully created. Okay. So what are we going to do with this flash message? We want to display it on the page, right? Using our template, which means that I will need to add this to my template data, right? Data. Remember, I can only pass one piece of data to my template. So that's the reason why I created a template data struct. And so I'm going to add flash to it. Of course, I haven't added flash yet. Okay, so I'll just go back into my, okay, right? Okay. Oh, okay. I'm not finished here. So I need to pop R on the key. Yeah. So R and the key, if you recall, is the word flash. Okay, good. Okay, now we said that we will initialize our flash field with this flash variable that we just have, which means I'll have to go back to my templates file and then I'll add a flash field. Okay, so flash, and it's of type string. Okay, good. So let's come back to our handler. Okay, so no more errors. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we can display our template, and hopefully it will have our quote, and on top of it, it will have that flash message. Okay. Now, obviously, I need to check for this flash in my template, right? So let's come here. It's called quote page. Yeah. Okay. Currently, it just prints the quote, so the body and the author. But I want to have um, the flash message. And that's easy, right? You remember when we talked about width when we were doing validation? We said that if um, if there's an error message, then you want some red to appear. You want to alter the page. But if there's no error, then you should see no red. So it's conditional. Okay, we can easily do that. We can say width again. So width flash. So if there is a message, all right, if there is a flash, if there is something in the flash field, right, if there is something in the flash field, then what I want to do, I want to show something. What is that something I want to show? I want to show that same message. Okay, and so I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to call this class flash, and it will correspond to some CSS that I have in a CSS file, whereby if we execute this flash, meaning that there is some message, meaning that this will show up, then we want it to be formatted using the flash class. Okay, so that's CSS. And then what the message should be, of course, is just whatever it is. And then we will close. And finally, we'll just end. Okay. All right. So again, this is conditional. If we find something in the flash field of our template data, then we'll display it. Now, if there's nothing, then remember, nothing meant is an empty string. So nothing will be displayed. Okay. All right. And of course, if we find a quote, which we should always find a quote, it will display the quote. Again, this is conditional. Okay. Okay. So all of this should be making sense because when you did your form validation, you had to do this. Okay. And so those are the steps. So again, let me open my browser. Step 1, you need to install a sessions manager, right? Step 2, you definitely need to import the session manager. In our case, github.com, golongcollege/sessions. The next thing you need to do is to place it inside our application struct because the handler, as you see, the handlers need access to it. Okay. And if, because the sessions manager, the way the sessions manager works, it needs a secret key. And so we create a flag just in case the user wants to provide that key on the command line, okay, or via a environment variable. So after we've done that, then we go ahead and we create or we initialize the session, right? So notice here we initialize the session, right? and there are many functions that we can use, many parameters that we can set. Okay, and in our case, we're setting the lifetime. So after we initialize, create a new session, we set some of the values. Okay, by the way, this is a struct. So what you will notice is there are many fields that are in the struct that you can actually set. Similar to how we have many fields in the server, http.server struct, the same thing applies for a session. Right? Okay, so that's the next thing we do. And of course, after we do that, we simply jump to our, oops, oh, seems my machine has frozen. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, we will go to our not handler, our routes, where, and this is important, any route that needs, or any, any handler that needs access to the session data, you want to wrap it with the app.session.enable middleware. Okay. Now, I could have simply taken this and I could have said app.session.enable, then wrap it, and then do handler func, and then do app.createCode, right? But that would have been too much work. So what I did instead, I created a middleware variable and I initialized it with app.session.enable. That way, I don't have to type this every time. Okay, and so now I just simply say dynamic middleware that then func. And of course, once we are finished with that, we simply move on to our handlers, which is where the action really is. We are essentially saying that we want to create or put something into the session store when we create a quote. And then when we display the quote, we want to get that thing from the session store. Okay, and so that's basically it. You want to be putting things into the session store and getting things from the session store for this particular user. Okay, let's give this a try. Okay, and then oh yeah, here we are. So notice the sessions is a type, it's a struct, and it has all these fields that you can set. For example, we just set lifetime. Okay, we can set persist. Okay, right, secure, and so on. Okay, I will put this in the links so that you can actually inspect it further. Okay, so localhost 4000 still works. Let's go to quote /create. So remember, this is going to be a get request. All right. Then let's add a quote. Love is love. And let's save. Okay. All right. So it says quote successfully added. However, my CSS doesn't seem to be working. Okay, let's see if we can quickly fix that. My styles, yeah, it's there. So let me go back to show page. Oh, okay. Is it code page? Yeah, that explains it. I don't have a link to my CSS file. Okay, so I need my link. Okay. Let's try that again. Let's go back. Okay, let's save quote. Interesting. Okay, I'm sure I saved that. Okay. Okay. I think I know what the problem is. Let's come here. Let's put a question mark. V equal 2. All right, so it might be having problem with the cache. I think it's using the old CSS file. So I would have to empty my cache for it to pick up the new CSS file. Okay, let's see if that resolves the issue. Yeah, that resolves the issue. So it was reading from the old CSS file. Okay, now, so notice when I insert the record, this flash message is displayed. Now, notice what happens here. If I refresh the page, okay, it doesn't show up, right? It's gone. And that's what we mean by a flash message. It's only shown once. Just to tell the user, we have added the page, and that's it, right? And remember, after we have used it, we pop it, we remove it. And so even if the user refreshes the page, then it doesn't change because it's a one-time message. And that's the reason why we say it's a flash message. So again, the idea is we want to maintain state. Okay? And so the only way I can really notify or tell the user that their message has been, yes, I could have written just a plain message, but by using a flash message, we can make it explicit and the message doesn't have to be there anymore. So even if we stay on the page, we refresh the page, the message does not come back. Okay? If it was a standard message, it would stay there. Okay, and so that's a use of sessions. All right, so we'll talk more about this. I just wanted you to get the mechanics down as to the idea of sessions and why we use them. Again, we use them because we sometimes need to maintain state in our web applications, such as who is logged in. Okay, who is logged in? Because inherently, HTTP is stateless. It doesn't remember. And so in web applications, we need to remember stuff. All right, so I'll see you in the next lesson where we transition to looking at HTTPS, okay? Secure HTTP. I'll see you in that next one.